Welcome to the Disability Resource Centre podcast, your go-to charity for advice, support and services. We are based in the heart of England and offer support all over the West Midlands. Whether it's information, advice, advocacy, life skills or health and wellbeing, we've got you covered. We also offer services around employment, training, volunteering, community development, counselling and energy and debt advice. Oh, and let's not forget our great carers. We offer support for you guys too. We hope this channel will be informative, helpful and inspiring by publishing a wide range of topics such as travel, legislation updates, services, debates and much more. So stay tuned to see what's coming up in this episode and please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Hi, today we're joined by Jessica Wing, a member of the staff from the Disability Resource Centre. Jess has come on today to give us some information on how COVID and lockdown is affecting people with disabilities in Birmingham. So, hi Jess, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, that's good. We'll go straight into it then, Jess. First thing I'm going to ask you is, can you give a brief description of the service that you've been doing, the sort of research that you've been doing?
Yeah, so during lockdown, we've received some funding from Birmingham City Council. We've been using that to do some research into how COVID and lockdown has been impacting some of our groups of service users. So the two specific strands of research we're doing are the impact on people with learning disabilities and people with visual impairments, so two specific groups. And in that, we're also looking at how it might have impacted their families and also their carers, where applicable. So we've been looking at two sort of specific questions. What has life been like for people with learning disabilities or people with visual impairments for them and their families during COVID and lockdown? And also we're asking about what are our service users' communication preferences? And what are their preferred ways of receiving information about COVID-19? And
this is still ongoing at the moment, isn't it? You're still doing more research, is that right?
Yes, so it is still open if anyone wants to take part in it and they have a learning disability or they have a visual impairment or perhaps they're a family member or carer for someone in those groups. At the moment I'm doing the report writing and sort of like collating and analysing the results, and we've had some really good feedback so far from these communities about quite a lot of challenges that have been faced during lockdown.
People who want to sort of participate in the survey can we'll provide the link on this podcast so you can do that way. Okay, Jess, that's great. Next question is, can you tell me what sort of things have changed since the lockdown?
Yeah, so for both groups, there have been obviously significant changes during lockdown. I'll sort of talk about the groups in turn. So for people with learning disabilities, there was a massive issue related to the sudden change in routine that happened. You know, sort of overnight, we were going from completely normal, and then bam, lockdown, everything shut, all of your activities that you go to stopped. You can't get a PA to come over anymore. So any support that was in place, and especially any activities that people could attend, for example, peer support, support services, activity providers were struggling to adapt to the new normal, and sort of in that lag of time, people just weren't getting the kind of support that they needed. So all of this had a massive negative impact on people's mental health. I mean, I think that it's almost goes without saying really, because it's probably had a massive impact on non-disabled people's mental health as well. It had a massive impact on unpaid carers in families. So some research, the Carers Week research report said that people doing unpaid care rose 50% during the pandemic. So yeah, I know. So there's no respite support in the forms of like activities for people to attend. So this can lead to sort of a knock-on situation for carers too, who are sort of having worsened mental health because of that. There was a lot of issues with people accessing even basic supplies, such as food, PPE, and there was a lot of anxiety about getting access to it. The hiking of the cost was ridiculous, and it led to people massively struggling and having to access food banks. And in terms of visual impairments, people with visual impairments were saying often that their independence was impacted. You know, they were no longer allowed to go and get their own shopping because they might need to be guided around the shop by a shop employee, but that's not following social distancing. So they were told, yeah, exactly. So either you can get online shopping, which of course they couldn't get a slot, or you can just sit there while I go and get your shopping for you. And they really didn't, and quite naturally you're having your independence taken away from you, and the things that you normally do just you're not allowed to do anymore. So there was massive problems there. And then also people with visual impairments were initially not seen as clinically vulnerable, so they weren't on the government's list of vulnerable people. So they were, the supermarkets were doing priority delivery slots. They weren't getting access to those. So people were struggling to access food.
I know as well in the deaf community, they're really struggling with particularly with the wearing of the masks and things like that, because obviously a lot of people do lip read and, or use I know there was that particular story of I can't think which MP it was, but in Westminster, I think he was leaning down to try and, they have the speakers in all of the seats, and he was bending down to try and hear what was being said because he had limited hearing. He was kind of accused of like sleeping, and I mean you've heard lots of horror stories with this, and people, and also deaf people that are are exempt from wearing the masks. I've heard stories of being bombarded and abused for not wearing them. I think people don't realise just how challenging this can be for people with disabilities.
Absolutely, and definitely there were several people that I interviewed. I don't think any of them were deaf, but both from visually impaired communities and people with learning disabilities, both in their own way. There was a lot of confusion: who's exempt from wearing a mask, who isn't. And one woman said to me, I've posted on social media about the fact that some groups are exempt, and I've received a barrage of abuse. And also on top of that, it was commented on that people say, well, I'm wearing a mask, so they would put a mask on and then they use that as an excuse not to use hand sanitizer and not to observe social distancing. So there was a lot of frustration. I think this reflects what a lot of people experience about rules being picked and chosen almost, and people not feeling comfortable or safe. But yeah, that was a big issue.
Yeah, most definitely. What challenges have you faced with doing this?
Yeah, so initially we had been planning to do it as a series of focus groups. We thought it would be a great opportunity for people to come together and talk as a group about what their collective experiences have been and sort of compare them together and almost provide a bit of support to each other. We realised that actually, our communities are very diverse. Some of them don't have internet access, and some of them, quite frankly, don't want internet access. And one thing that we've noticed is that with the lockdown, everything has been pushed onto online. People don't have access to online a lot of the time. People don't have Zoom. So doing a group, like a focus group, online, it would have to have been online to be legal. It would have been excluding certain voices from the group, which we absolutely didn't want. So we sort of adapted it so that instead it was a bit more flexible. So I did Zoom interviews with people, I did some phone interviews with people. I think I had one or two respondents download the questions and type up their responses. And I've honestly found that having that flexibility and allowing people to choose the way that they access this research has been great, because it means I've been able to listen to different kinds of voices and sort of take into account what people have to say. So it was an initial challenge, but to have to change our plan, but it's ended up being a lot more accessible. A further challenge, I would say, is hearing the really difficult things that people have experienced during lockdown and the kind of lack of support that they've had, and how almost there's nothing I can do about it. For people who really want their face-to-face meetings, for example, but it's just not legal. And I think for me, a theme that came up a lot in both groups that I interviewed there was this sense of going backwards, of their independence being taken away, of plans that they had for the future being put on hold, and this sort of leading to negative health outcomes. So not getting outside as much, so your physical health gets worse, your mental health gets worse, the anxiety caused by lockdown sort of taking you back a few months or even a couple of years in some cases. So it was really difficult for me to sort of feeling so, you know, sympathetic and empathetic towards these issues, to sort of, you know, listen and not have the ability to do anything about it.
Yeah, it must be frustrating. Yeah, okay. The other thing, can you give us some good news stories? You had any good news stories out of the research you've been doing?
Yeah, no, as I've said, like a lot of it is, I wish I did have good news stories, but I have to say, like, I have to take a moment to appreciate the huge amount of work that local mutual aid organisations have done across the pandemic. You know, they had massive early responses to people who were in need, often moving a lot quicker than charities did. So, for example, I spoke to several of the people who volunteer with Erdington Mutual Aid. Their work that they've done has been incredible, and they've been really responsive to the needs of people in their community, and they've provided that support just, you know, immediately. And they've also been so helpful to me in participating in the research and, you know, letting me pick their brains on what they think the problems are. They've been really open and really kind. So it's been a good news story, I would say, is like being able to build links with people in the community and get to know the amazing work that people have been doing during what is frankly a really horrible time. Yeah,
most definitely. I mean, community spirit's amazing, something in a lot of places.
Definitely.
Unbelievable. Have you got any user feedback from the studies, the work you've been doing up to now?
Yeah, so
any kind of quotes or anything that people you've been in contact with have said?
Mm-hmm. So these are sadly not like positive examples of feedback, because these are sort of quotes from people that have been talking about the difficulties that they've had. But people have said, for example, I've been running an activity group in my cafe in January. I don't know when we can do that again. It's a shame, as I just had confidence to start doing it. I also had another quote from someone saying, it's put me back a year or two as a blind person. I was just really looking to spread my wings. It's meant that mentally, because I've not been able to, it's like my life has stopped, which is kind of disempowering, really. There have been quotes from people who've said that they couldn't get a slot for online shopping. One person said, wouldn't have been able to get by without the local food bank. So really, there's been this sort of massive, across the board, people have had issues even accessing basic food, to, you know, activities being taken away and, you know, not having any respite for the care that they're doing. So it's been quite dire, really.
Yeah, I certainly know the online ordering. It's just, you can, I don't know, it's not recent times, but I know there's one time you were waiting sort of a month or so to get a slot.
And on top of that, actually, a really interesting but frankly awful thing is that, you know, after the sort of rush of the first lockdown, they implemented their vulnerable lists and they made priority orders for disabled people online. Well, after lockdown lifted a tiny bit, these shops stopped their vulnerable lists. So they stopped having these records of people who had access to those things. And of course now I would love to speak to those people again and find out, but as from the last time I spoke to them, they're saying, well, they refuse to keep my name. So what if we have another lockdown? I'm going to have to fight to be on that list again. So it's almost like people aren't learning from their mistakes. And there was a lot of cases actually of people. I had a couple of people who they weren't even physically allowed into the shop. They were told, I had one person who was told, your carer's allowance letter isn't proof that you're a carer, despite the fact that you can show your blue badge, you can show your carer's allowance letter, you can't join the priority queue with your disabled son, get to the back of the queue. And they were sort of saying, well, I can't be in a 20-minute, half an hour queue. This will really distress my son, but they can't get online shops. So your hands are tied. And I'd be really interested to sort of follow up with these people and find out how things are going, because
Did they say what sort of proof they'd need?
That's the thing. The top down advice from above was, benefits letters, etc. are fine, but it's like it wasn't getting through to the people who were actually monitoring the doors. And obviously it was really patchy, because you'd have one Sainsbury's, a little Sainsbury's local, for example, that would have like the same employees that they've always had, and they'd get to know the people that come and visit, and they'd be fantastic. And then you get the bigger supermarkets that are terrible, and it's just sort of, there was no rhyme or reason. Just some supermarkets were great, and then the same supermarket in a different area would be terrible. And I think it is just that communication between people in the same company of what the rules are. I'm hoping that was just a complete outlier, but of course there's no real way of knowing.
Okay, final question from me, Jess. If people would like to sort of get involved with this research that you're doing, obviously I can't really read out the link because it's a big long gobbledygook, but I'll put the link in the description. And people can email you, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So my email address is jwing@disability.co.uk. You can just drop me an email, and we can set up a Zoom or a phone interview. Or there is also a link on our website. So if you go to disability.co.uk, you'll be able to find the COVID-19 links. We also have a huge compendium of relevant resources for COVID-19 that we've sort of listed on our website, which you can access as well.
Okay, Jess, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For the work you're doing. I'm just really, really interested. Unfortunately, not much positivity in there. There's a lot of people suffering with this. I mean, everybody is, of course.
It's a lot to learn.
Particularly people.
It's a lot to learn about.
Yeah, most definitely. But I'm pretty sure that the research that you do, hopefully at some stage, will somewhere along the line make a difference. If not going somewhere that maybe our listeners can understand that a lot of people are finding these same issues, and hopefully they can make a bit of a change.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, Jess, and we'll speak to you soon.
Take care. Bye bye.
Take care. Cheers. Bye.